Hello and welcome. I am your host of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Author Karen E. Osborne. I have 5 novels out. The latest is Justice for Emerson. I am so glad that you're here. This is a space for readers and writers to come together and talk about books. I am so pleased to introduce you, and this is the first time I am meeting Andrew C. Phillips, debut author on his publication day. Yay! Hey, Andy.
Hey Karen, how are you? Good to see you. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, I'm delighted, and I really want to just really talk about this amazing book that you've written, your first book. So let's start a little bit about you. Just tell us a little bit about your writing journey. Did you always want to write? Just give us a little flavor of who you are.
I grew up in North Carolina. I was in a family of educators, and my mother, bless her heart, loved Edgar Rice Burroughs and especially his Tarzan books. And then she loved his movies, Johnny Weissmuller and all that. So I read Tarzan. I read Edgar Rice Burroughs. I loved horses. I read Walter Farley, the Black Stallion and the Island Stallion. And then I loved fairy tales and Jack's tales. Uh, a fellow named Richard Chase, who was a wonderful storyteller down in the South and throughout this country, I think, wrote Jack's tales, and I read those and loved those. When I was probably 6 or 7, I had a favorite picture book. I can't remember what it was, but I remember sitting down and copying the words to that book. I copied them word all the way through, and I thought I had written that book. It, it that's what I believed at the time. My first original book was probably a couple of years later. It was not a school assignment, but I wrote a book about a young boy who had a flying horse and a magic sword, and they went out and conquered a multi-eyed dragon. It was called The Flying Horse. I can't find that manuscript. It's somewhere in an envelope in an attic in a box, but someday, maybe someday I'll find it. My real interest in writing didn't come until later after I graduated from UNC Chapel Hill. I was in the uh, elementary education program. I went into the Navy during Vietnam and came back. My father was state superintendent at the time in North Carolina, and we were really pushing early childhood education. And he got me interested in that because there just weren't very many men in early childhood education. So I was an intern with that division, got to visit the British infant schools, uh, got really interested in young children. And I had learned a little bit of guitar in the Navy, just dangerous enough to sing a folk song or two. And when I got back and got involved with kids, got my master's in early childhood, I started trying to write some songs for children. And my wife and I worked on a master's degree together and actually did it on music and how music can help children learn to read. We
Wow.
we
Wow. That is such a great yeah, I have a 6-year-old grandson, he's my youngest grandson, and he's struggling to read. And so we got him a tutor, and I have to, because he's bilingual, but I have to I have to talk to you later about how music could help a child read. That's awesome. That takes us off subject, but I really want to talk to you about that.
yes, yes.
So what inspired so you're moving along. What inspired this book in Jake's shoes? I heard the military background, and so that's in there. And and relationships between generations. What really inspired in Jake's shoes?
Well, at the time, as I was a teacher and became a principal, uh, and had we had our own kids, I was learning about children and trying to learn, how do I get to know them better? How do I understand them better? How do I understand their world? And right in the middle of all of that, uh, sort of had a singular event that occurred. My mother died of cancer pretty quickly, and uh, I was struggling on how to cope with that loss, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to write a journal about it. I didn't want to do a memoir. I'd been writing songs with kids, and I'd even started to write some picture books and a middle grade novel or so. I tried my hand at that, but that I wanted to figure out a way to deal with my mother's grief. And my route was to write. And I wrote as a young boy whose grandmother had just died. And
Mm.
he was struggling himself with just growing up, and he didn't think he had anybody that would listen to him and tell him not to feel what he was supposed to feel, and all this. And he writes her letters and he tells her those things. So I wrote a series of these letters, and they're to his gammy gat. I had a gammy gat as a young boy, and I, a number of those letters just came. They were just random letters, but about that young boy and his struggles. And later, as I got to know more about kids and teaching, uh, I I thought this needs to be a novel. I need to make a novel. I need to write a story that uses those letters as a springboard. And that's how In Jake's Shoes uh, came to
Wow.
be. Remembering my childhood, that it's hard to do. How did I feel when I was a child? And how does that relate to how I understand children, teaching them and being their principal and being their father and being a grandparent? And
Yeah, yeah.
that's how that novel came to be.
So give our audience who's watching a little bit about the premise of the book. What's the setting? What's the years that we're looking at? Just give us a little blurb about the book.
It is in the South, in a small town in the South, and the setting is a couple of settings. It's obviously in the military for a brief time, and then the father who grew up in the 50s, uh, and his son Jake, who the story is about, which is like late 90s, early almost 2000. So it's a contemporary story, but it does look back at the 50s because Marshall recalls memories from the 50s. His son is an 11-year-old boy. They move to a town that's new. He loses his best friend. He has to go to a new school, and he struggles to cope with that. His father, Marshall, misinterprets that struggle as misbehavior, and he treats it that way. He wants to correct it instead of just connect with his son and learn about it. And at the time, Jake realized that, and just like the Jake in those letters, and I use those letters as
Hmm.
obviously the springboard. Jake writes his gammy gat because he thinks she's the only one that will listen to him and not tell him how to feel and what to do. And the estrangement between he and his father continue through the elementary years and into high school. Jake uh, leaves and goes into the service, joins a mortuary affairs unit in the Army. And right before Christmas, he writes a letter to his parents and says, when I come home soon, I want us to talk about that year, which the year that he wrote those letters to his Gammy Gap, which was a very, very difficult year. He knows that he needs to talk about it and sort of reconcile with his father. But right before Christmas, Jake is killed. Right before, and the, they have a funeral. Family comes in the South. You know, the families gather and food is shared and all that. And Marshall is just very distraught. Sneaks away to the attic where nobody knows where he is. And as he rumbles around in the attic, he finds these letters which Jake had written secretly. And he everything from that point changes. and he learns about who Jake that he did not know.
No. Yes, yes. It's and we get, the reader gets to know Jake a little bit better than his dad does.
Yes,
Because we meet him in the service. We meet him at the beginning when he's in this mortuary unit. It was a really gripping opening scene. I thought you captured us. You caught us in the opening scene of the book. I really loved it. When you think about Marshall and Jake, um, and maybe even Gammy Gat if you want to. But what do you really admire about Jake? What do you admire about Marshall?
well, I think they were both fairly normal folks, which is what I wanted this story to be about. I wanted it to be about. I'm not sure what typical family is in this country or normal, but I wanted it to be about regular people. And the thing that I probably liked most about Marshall, and even though I got angry at him myself sometimes, and I was probably getting angry at my own self uh, from at many points in time. His heart was always in the right place. But what he had in for me and was he was a victim of what I call well-intentioned misunderstanding. And he was a bit of a pragmatist. For him, a rule was a rule, and you had to manage your kids' behavior, uh, and it necessarily didn't involve great comforting and great connecting, and that's where his mind went. But that whole sense of heart in the right place and well-intentioned misunderstanding is something that I think we all have fall
Yes.
fall into that trap. Jake was, I thought, a normal kid. I wanted him to be a normal kid, but he had a real sense of fair play and
Mm,
a real sense of sensitivity and empathy. There's a little friend in the story that he befriends a young kid that has a horrible home life, and Jake befriends him. There's a whole bit about that and how Jake interprets Randy's troubles and then equates them to his own is a big part of the story. Uh, the
he's a
wife, his
big-hearted
wife,
kid.
yeah,
He
his
is, and
wife
he turned out
Millie.
to be a nice man too.
Yes, yes, yes. His mother is the glue in the house for me, and she's sort of that steady the boat kind of person. You know, when it gets a little bumpy.
Yeah, it's a beautiful family. And you say, regular people, they're very relatable. Everybody reading them will be can easily relate to the characters in the book. I really appreciated that. So, is there a sequel? Are you writing something new?
There's not a sequel to this. This was a one-off adult novel for me. I have uh, several middle grade novels. One that uses some magical realism in there. Another one that's an upper middle grade what I call an upper middle grade tween novel. That's a bit of a dystopian fantasy, and then another one that is a trilogy. It's another fantasy. I was a real fan of fantasy growing up. Her books, Susan Cooper, those stories. I read a lot of that genre now uh, to
Yeah,
help me.
yeah. So you've got a lot going on. You've got a lot in the works. That is exciting. When you were writing, especially this book, in Jake's Shoes, uh, did you learn anything new about yourself? Did you discover something about yourself?
Well, one of the things uh, and it had to do with just writing, learning to write, and I was pretty naive about editing. I was one of those that thought, "Gosh, I'd written my first draft. this is great. What do I need to change? Right. So that it hits you pretty strong in the face that no, yes, there's an awful lot you need to deal with. And Stephen King helped a lot. His book on writing uh,
Yes.
is just so marvelous, and it takes several readings of that, and that helped me embrace editing. And now it's kind of fun every now and then. It's not fun hearing somebody tell you what they think you ought to do, but uh, and I think we all know about that. Uh,
Yeah.
but
But it
I've
is.
come to embrace that.
And to be a writer, we do. We have to embrace the power of rewriting and
Yes,
and enjoy it because that takes as much time as it does usually to write the first draft. You spend
yes,
another, right?
good gracious, for
Yes,
sure,
yes.
for sure.
So now, so as you all know, this is publication day, as we mentioned to you all watching
Yes, excited
and
about that.
listening. Very exciting. And so you have some cool things around publication day that our watchers and listeners might want to be connected to. You were telling me about a podcast and what else?
I do have a website that has some links to a podcast and some what I hope are some creative treatments of talking about the book and talking about kids. And the podcast itself is one where I try to take we use some elements from the book, some of Jake's letters, for instance. I'll read some uh, uh, excerpts from letters. I will read some of my children's books. I will tell some of my experiences and stories from teaching and from being a principal. And we try to make that connection with, and it's called the journey inside. And it's
Mhm.
trying to help folks begin to look at kids and finding that light inside and really understanding where they're coming from, what their world is, which may help us as the adults in the room now to just better understand where they're coming from, and it may calm our connections and our reactions sometimes. One of the things I always told my teachers when I was principal is sometimes we expect our kids to already know what it is we're there to help them learn, and uh, and sometimes our face tells them that. Sometimes a tone in our voice. Uh, we had a quick story. If I've got it, we had if we got a minute, one just a quick one, just a quick minute. We had self-service in the line, and at my school, and the kids were just learning how to do that. And we had my 5-year-olds come in there, and they'd reach in and take a spoon and dip out the hit the peach juice into the beans and mix it all together, and the teachers would fuss at them. And I said, wait a minute, they hadn't learned how to do this. This is part of them learning how to do it. So don't expect them to already know what it is you're there to help them learn. So that those things like that help me to see that better, and that's what I talk about in
Love it.
the
It sounds
podcast. And
awesome. So before you go, two things before you go. So one is if you've already mentioned so many books that have helped you over the years. Have you read anything recently that you can recommend to our audience? Something middle grade or whatever you like
well,
sharing.
a book that and I mentioned that I have read a lot of middle grade novels. One that was a gentleman from Moscow by
That was
Tolles, and I know there's some controversy. Some people just thought he went on and on and on, and was. But for me, his language is so lovely and so lyrical, and I felt like I was sitting at the table eating with him in that hotel in the book. So it's a book that if you really want to read and something that has beautiful language
good.
and helps you see yourself there, and then an understanding of friendship and love and those kind of things. It was was a great book for me
That was a
and
great
a
book.
fun read.
Yes. Thank you. That is awesome. Your website is, how do they find you? What's your website?
Well, www, I guess you don't have to say www anymore, but andrewcphillips.com. And you can go on there and subscribe, and you can click on the podcast. And we've got some YouTube shorts that are little 30, 40 second reflections on each of the podcasts that we do that are related to that, which are kind of fun. We've developed those. And we've got what we call Inside the Pages, which just talks about kids. It's the podcast itself is just talking and thinking about kids and recognizing that, as I said earlier, that well, we happen to be the adults in the room, and it's up to
Yes.
us to really listen and connect with our youngsters, especially in these day and time.
I bet you were a wonderful teacher and a wonderful principal. I hope you all have absolutely enjoyed this conversation. I know that you can get his book, In Jake's Shoes. You can find
I
it
can
on
show it to you.
Amazon. Oh, yes, let's show them the cover. Let's show the cover.
Let's
It's a
see, is
great cover. Look at
that
that.
that do it?
That's gorgeous. So you can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Barnes and Noble. You can find it in your local independent store. You can borrow it from your library. And please do that and know how important reviews are. So if you love the book the way I did, write a review like I did. We thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much, Andy, for being with us. Until next time on What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Bye, everybody.